There has never been a... We anticipate in the next 10 to 12 years, approximately 8 to 6 million Hispanics coming into the United States and 41 million Asians. You have been the majority minority for 400 years in this country. You have been the number 2 population for 400 years. You're going to get kicked out of being number 2. You're going to go down and become number 4. Now, common sense, even a third grade education will tell you, if you didn't get anything when you were number 2, you all jumped ahead of me, but anyway, you can guess what you're going to get when you become number 4.
President Biden, do you support reparations?
Well, I mean, since I haven't spoken in this for a chance, number one, the reason we're the country we are is because of immigration. We've been able to cherry pick the best from every single time. The people who come here have determination, resilience. They are ready to stand up and work like the devil. We have 24 out of 100 children in our school today is Hispanic. The idea that we are going to walk away and not provide every opportunity for them is that not only stupid and immoral, but it's bad for America. They are the future of America. Systemic racism that has plagued our nation for far, far too long. I said that over the course of the past year that the blinders have been taken off the nation, the American people. But what many Americans didn't see or had simply refused to see couldn't be ignored any longer. Those 8 minutes and 46 seconds that took George Floyd's life opened the eyes of millions of Americans and millions of people around all over the world. It was the knee on the neck of justice, and it wouldn't be forgotten. And it's not white Americans' fault, but just a fact.
The very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today, many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And this is what we are faced with. And this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
We are owed $104 trillion on the very low end, plus $735 billion recurring. This number does not include the cost of about 50 Black Wall Streets that were decimated, nor compound interest from 2017 when Sean D. Rochester's book, The Black Tax, was published, nor the cost of Black life, nor the cost of living increases, nor the war on drugs, nor the current day pandemic. The number I'm working with is for slavery, Jim Crow, and accrued ongoing systemic racism, oppression, and disadvantage in the country our ancestors built with their lives. If you believe in this number as I do and would like to join me in the fight for reparations, please email me at friendsofabostv@gmail.com. That's friendsofabostv@gmail.com.
Good evening on the West Coast. Good evening in the Central. Good evening in the Mountain. Good evening on the East Coast. You know exactly who it is, family. Angela Nirvana, your hostess with the mostest on the reparationist perspective, bringing you those ADOC's hot topics and our vote and socializing our suffering. And today, family, as part of the Ida B. Wells 2.0 series, Anti-Black Racism presents the Chauvin trial updates. Day 9. Oh, we got a good show in store for you today, family. Thank you, one and all. I see you, Brian Johnson. I see you, Morgan, in Clubhouse. Family, if you want to see me live, you're free to come on over to YouTube. The Reparationist Perspective. Or you can be comfortable right over there in Clubhouse, and I'll catch up with you if you're still on the Clubhouse as the show concludes. Yes, we got a lot to talk about, family. Yes, I thank you one and all. For those of you who are back for round 2, I have many of you that come over and join me in my new series, As the World of ADOX Turns. And I'm so grateful when you decide to roll with your sister in the noon for the midday wake-up call, okay, and in the evening. So thank you, one and all. I will not belabor. I have a lot to go over. So let's jump right into it, family. Okay, so today, 2 medical doctors and a forensic toxicologist testified today in Chauvin's murder trial in the death of George Floyd. It was an exciting day, family. This man is really guilty of first-degree murder. Both doctors testified that Floyd died of a lack of oxygen after he was pinned to the ground with his hands cupped behind him and Chauvin's knee on his neck. Me speaking. Did you see that Chauvin purposely and intentionally murdered this man? He also was putting a pressure point on his hand. Did you guys see that, Mickey Thicky? So let's get this all the way together. The knee to the neck, the knee in the back, and he was holding a pressure point and had him in a manipulation that was causing severe pain in addition to the asphyxiation that everybody testified today. I mean, prosecutor was whooping the ass of defense and taking names on cross and on cross. It was brilliant. It was brilliant. There is no other way around this. You can't blame it on the rain. You can't blame it on Martians. You can't blame it on aliens. You can't blame it on drugs, underlying health issues. You killed this man by asphyxiation. I just had to point that out because during one of the hearings on television, they were showing Chauvin putting pressure on his hands to bring about pain to the man's hand, as if what he was doing to take his life wasn't enough. Okay? So I just had to throw that in. Back to the text. The forensic toxicologist said that the fentanyl found in Floyd's system was lower than levels found in 94% of the DUI cases. Hennepin County Medical Examiner Dr. Andrew Baker is expected to testify tomorrow. The medical examiner said an autopsy listed Floyd's cause of death as a cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating law enforcement subdual restraint and neck compression. So we'll see how that goes on mañana. So let's jump right in. Let me get to the beginning of the commentary so I can read it from the beginning. They go backwards in these updates that I'm reading to you. It's listed and documented going backwards. So I got to go to the bottom and scroll to the top. Okay, let's see here. So, Chauvin never took his knee off of Floyd's neck. Are you aware that even after he expired, Chauvin's knee stayed on his neck for 2 minutes and 44 seconds? In addition to having killed him, he stayed on the knee 2 minutes and 44 seconds after the man had expired. Let's get into it. Expert says that Chauvin never took the knee off Floyd's neck area. Now, we know defense has been trying to claim that it was on the shoulder, It was on the back. Yeah, it was on the back and the neck. He's trying to do a Jedi mind trick and make the jury think that they ain't seeing what they saw. We all saw, okay, not just the jury. So Chauvin had his knee on Floyd's neck and was bearing down with most of his weight the entire 9.5 minutes. Mr. Floyd lay face down with his hands cupped behind his back. A use of force expert testified today. Actually, that was wait, not today. He didn't testify. This was testimony from yesterday. Okay, so let me scroll up. They conflating the two. I already did that one. Here we go. Pulmonary doctor testifies George Floyd died of low level of oxygen. The first witness called this morning in the murder trial of Derek Chauvin was a physician in pulmonary and critical care medicine who said Mr. Floyd died from a low level of oxygen. Dr. Tobin, Martin Tobin, is a physician with the Edward Hines Jr. VA Hospital and Loyola University Medical School in Chicago. He has been working in respiratory physiology for about 46 years and has served as an expert witness in court before. Tobin said he was asked to review medical records and watch videos related to the case. He said he believed Floyd died of a low level of oxygen that caused damage to his brain and also led his heart to stop beating. Okay? So the state is going to call multiple medical experts over the next couple of days. His testimony was fire. Okay? He also said that he believes there were 4 forces that caused George Floyd's shallow breathing and led to his death. Quote, the main forces that are going to lead to the shallow breath are going to be that he's turned prone on the street, face down, that he has the handcuffs in place combined with the street, and then that he has a knee on his neck, and then that he has a knee on his back and on his side. Hines said, oh my God. All these 4 forces are ultimately going to result in the low tidal volume, which gives you the shallow breaths that we saw here. All of them. Murder is the case that they need to give them. Murder in the first degree is what this was. The prosecution has argued that George Floyd died from Chauvin kneeling on his neck for more than 9 minutes. True statement. I'm having to scroll up. So the expert also testified that more about why the knee on Floyd's neck and back were extremely important when considering what caused the lack of breathing that led to his death. On this part, Dr. Martin Tobin loosened his tie, unbuttoned the top button on his shirt, and instructed the jurors to feel their necks as he testified about why a knee on the neck was so important. He said that a knee on Mr. Floyd's neck was extremely important because it's going to occlude the air getting in through the passageway. He walked the jurors through a demonstration of their own neck anatomy, pointing them to the hypopharynx, which he called vulnerable. The hypopharynx is very important for understanding this case for a number of reasons, because it's so vulnerable, because it has no cartilage around it. It's going to be an area that is compressed, he said. It's extremely small to breathe through, and it becomes very important for being able to continue to breathe through. Tobin added that Chauvin's knee was on that area of Floyd's neck at points with enough pressure to cut off his breathing. Fire today, y'all. He also said, as the jurors were shown a photo in which Chauvin's toe is lifted slightly off the pavement as he kneels on George Floyd's neck. Tobin said that by his calculation, at one point, 91.5 pounds, half of Chauvin's body weight and half the weight of his gear was on Mr. Floyd's neck. This means that all of his body weight is being directed down at Mr. Floyd's neck, Chauvin said. This is fire. He calculated Derek Chauvin's knee was on Mr. Floyd's neck for more than 3 minutes after there was not an ounce of oxygen left in his body. So of those 9.5 minutes, he kept his knee on the neck 3 minutes longer after all the oxygen had left Mr. Floyd's body. This is first-degree murder. Chauvin said at 8:25 p.m. on the day Mr. Floyd reached a point where he did not have an ounce of oxygen left in his entire body, as Chauvin continued to have his knee pressed against his neck while he was handcuffed on the ground in the prone position face down. The knee remained on the neck for another 3 minutes and 2 seconds after we reached the point where there was not 1 ounce of oxygen left in the body. A healthy person subjected to what Mr. Floyd was subjected to would have died. So he testified that he's aware that Mr. Floyd had pre-existing conditions as mentioned in his autopsy and medical records. Quote, do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to whether a person who had none of these pre-existing conditions, a healthy person, would have died under the same circumstances as Mr. Floyd? Prosecutor Jerry Blackwell asked him. Yes. A healthy person subjected to what Mr. Floyd was subjected to would have died. The prosecution has said Floyd died from Chauvin's kneeling on the neck. The Hennepin County Medical Examiner's Office classified Floyd's death as a homicide that occurred while he was being restrained by police. Floyd's cause of death was listed as cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating law enforcement subdual restraint and neck compression. Under other significant conditions, it said Floyd suffered from hypertensive heart disease and listed fentanyl intoxication and recent methamphetamine use. Every time I think it's time to go deliberate, I get another fire testimony. Whew! So he testified today that the idea of if you speak, you can breathe is both very dangerous and highly misleading. Chauvin said even though such a statement was technically true in the sense that when a person speaks, they are exhaling, it also gives an enormous false sense of security. Certainly at the moment that you are speaking, you are breathing, but it doesn't tell you that you're going to be breathing 5 seconds later, he said. Chauvin added that at the time Floyd was restrained on the ground and telling officers he could not breathe, he still had oxygen in his brain. And again, quote, it's a perfect example of how it gives you a huge false sense of security because very shortly after that, we're going to see that he has a major loss of oxygen in the way that he moves his leg, he added. Chauvin said, this showed how dangerous the concept of if you can speak, you can breathe actually was. That was what the race soldiers told him. I think it was Chauvin specifically told him if he could speak that he was breathing to justify murdering him. Yes, that is true on the surface, but highly misleading. A very, very dangerous mantra to have out there, he said. Mantra. Okay. Moving on. He also cast doubt on the role of fentanyl in Floyd's lack of oxygen. Okay. He testified today that George Floyd's respiratory rate was normal before he lost consciousness, and fentanyl was not having an effect on his respiratory centers based on his rate of breathing. Chauvin said, while Floyd was restrained on the ground, he was still experiencing a normal respiratory rate of 22. Welcome to the live, Ma. I'm live at the Reparations Perspective on YouTube. He said if fentanyl were causing a depression of his respiratory centers, one would expect a 40% reduction in his respiratory rate. He said if fentanyl were causing a depression of his respiratory centers, one would expect a 40% reduction in his respiratory rate. He said if Floyd's respiratory rate was 22, then one would expect a respiratory rate of 10 if fentanyl was having an effect. Chauvin agreed with prosecutor Jerry Blackwell that he did not see a depressed rate of breathing in Floyd and that his respiratory rate was normal just before he lost consciousness. The defense has argued that fentanyl, which was found in Floyd's system at the time of his death, and other drugs can lead to insufficient oxygen in the body, as part of the defense's argument that Chauvin was not the cause of Floyd's death. You see, so the defense is trying to get this off. And the medical experts today was like, oh no, not here. Oh no, you don't. Oh no, you won't. It was fire, family. Okay, I didn't see all of it, but I saw some of it. I'll give you a couple of my notes, my takeaways. Quote, you will never know as much as an expert as they do about their area of expertise. Mary Moriarty, the former chief public defender of Hennepin County, where Chauvin is being tried on charges of second and third degree murder and second degree manslaughter, weighs in on how difficult it can be to cross and examine an expert. Chauvin's attorney, Eric Nelson, is cross-examining Dr. Chauvin, a lung and critical care specialist at the Edward Hines Jr. VA Hospital and Loyola University Medical School in Chicago. Chauvin, a pulmonologist and world-renowned expert on breathing, has corrected Nelson a number of times. Woo! Now he was fired. Nelson asked Chauvin a series of open-ended questions, including what he believes caused George Floyd's death. Chauvin testified earlier that Floyd died from a low level of oxygen. Mary Moriarty says experts can be extremely difficult to cross-examine because you will never know as much as they do about their area of expertise. The defense lawyer has to use the courtroom, which is his or her territory. This means controlling the witness by asking leading questions. Those are the questions that get all of us irate, right? It always makes me nervous when Mr. Nelson gets up and tries to, wriggle the testimony into a Jedi mind trick to make everyone in the world believe that we saw something other than what we bore witness to. Near the end of Dr. Chauvin's testimony, Chauvin's attorney again attempted to link the fentanyl found in Floyd's system to his death, a central part of the defense's case. The renowned expert pulmonologist made clear he did not believe there was a connection. Quote, generally speaking, fentanyl can also cause death as a result of low oxygen to the brain, right? Defense attorney Eric Nelson asked. Quote, but it would have to be through respiratory depression, Chauvin responded. Checkmate. The defense repeated the question, looking for a yes or no response. Chauvin would not concede that the science was that simple. Prosecutor Jerry Blackwell followed up by asking Chauvin if people go into a coma before they die, if the cause of death is fentanyl. Chauvin replied that they do. Was Mr. Floyd ever in a coma? Blackwell then asked. Chauvin responded with a simple no. Okay. This is murder one. Forensic toxicologist, type of fentanyl in Floyd's body not typically found in fatal overdose victims. The state called a forensic toxicologist on the stand this afternoon, Dr. Daniel Isenschmidt. is a forensic pathologist for NMS laboratory in Pennsylvania. The lab did testing of blood work in the case of George Floyd's death. An autopsy found fentanyl and methamphetamine in his system. Schmidt testified the type of fentanyl found in Floyd's system is not usually found in fatal overdose victims, suggesting that Floyd did not OD. He said that the fentanyl found in Floyd's system was lower than levels found in 94% of DUI cases. The defense has claimed drug use, underlying health conditions, and the adrenaline flow through his body led to Floyd's death. And every expert that the prosecutor has brought in has decimated those claims. Decimated in the most brilliant fashion. It's been rich to observe. Working in the courts as a litigator myself, this has been school for me. It's been rich. Woo! Chauvin attorney's attempts to obfuscate pulmonologist's testimony, seemingly to confuse the jurors. That's all he can do at this point. He's got nothing. Okay? Chauvin testified that Mr. Floyd died of a lack of oxygen from being pinned on his stomach with his hands cupped behind him and his face against the pavement. Nelson tried to challenge it. He argued that Floyd's drug use and underlying health problems were what killed him. Nelson asked Chauvin if his scientific conclusions were based on assumptions, given that no one was at the scene to take various measurements, such as Chauvin's weight. He is really trying it. He is really trying it, y'all. I'm muting the sound on this phone. So let's move on. Chauvin, who appeared unflappable while he was being questioned by Nelson, responded that his calculations are based on direct evidence, research, and very few assumptions. Mary Moriarty, the former chief public defender of Hennepin County, said Chauvin was very effective in teaching the jury about complicated concepts in plain English. I am not sure I've ever seen an expert this effective, she tweeted. Legal analysts, defense had real uphill climb in cross-examination of Chauvin. So these are people weighing in on the cross from the defense. So, quote, these are the scariest kinds of expert witnesses because they've forgotten more about the topic than the attorney will ever know. These are the scariest kinds of expert witnesses because they've forgotten more about the topic than the attorney will ever know, NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalas said. And this is the kind of witness that can really beat you up unless you have some really focused cross-examination. Nelson was no match. And that sentence seems off. I feel a typo somewhere in there. Chauvin repeatedly cast doubt on the role of fentanyl in George Floyd's death, a key argument of defense. He also testified Chauvin's knee on Floyd's neck and back was extremely important when considering what caused the lack of breathing that led to his death. Savalas said the problem for the defense is that the prosecution does not need to prove Chauvin's knee on Floyd's neck was the sole cause of death, but instead that it was a substantial factor. They went a long way towards that today, he said, while adding the defense has yet to call their witnesses. Savalas added the prosecution's use of demonstrative exhibits and images along with Chauvin's testimony were the kind of tactics that can make a point very sticky in a juror's mind in a way that words just might not. Their writing is poor in some spaces. Prosecutors called a Kentucky police surgeon and emergency medicine physician with specialized training in forensic medicine to take the stand this afternoon. Dr. William Smock, who is a police surgeon at the Louisville Metro Police Department and a professor of emergency medicine at the University of Louisville, also trains police on topics such as strangulation and asphyxia and forensic evaluation of gunshot wounds. He said he is an expert in asphyxial death and strangulation. Thank you, one and all, for those who have joined the live. And thank you for your donations, helping me to educate the masses and to advocate for reparations and a Black agenda for ADOCs and all Blacks alike. If you'd like to contribute to the show, do so at Cash App, $FOADOS, $FOADOS TV, Cash App, and then there's a PayPal link. Thank you so much. Okay, so, he said, okay, let's move on, because that's the one I came in on after I got through working. Dr. William Smock, the police surgeon and director of the clinical forensic medicine program for the Louisville Metro Police Department, testified that Mr. Floyd died of positional asphyxia or lack of oxygen. Mr. Floyd died from positional asphyxia, which is a fancy way of saying he died because he had no oxygen left in his body, Smock said. When the body is deprived of oxygen, in this case from pressure on his chest and back, he gradually succumbs to lower and lower levels of oxygen until it was gone, and he died. Searing testimony today. Smock testified that he came to that conclusion after ruling out other causes of death, including fentanyl overdose. Smock, a former medical examiner, is the second witness to testify today that Mr. Floyd died from low or no oxygen. Chauvin was the first. Earlier, Dr. Martin Chauvin, a world-renowned expert on breathing, said Floyd died from a low level of oxygen. I don't know who defense is going to bring in to counter all this. I don't know who. Mr. Floyd died from a low level of oxygen, and this caused damage to his brain that we see. And it's also caused a PEA, pulseless electrical activity, arrhythmia, because his heart stopped, Tobin said. Okay, there's a correction here. It says a previous version of this post misidentified an expert witness who testified today about Mr. Floyd's cause of death. It was police surgeon Dr. William Smock, not forensic toxicologist Daniel Isenschmidt, okay? The court has recessed after day 21. What? After day 21? I don't know what that means. Today is day 9. Some of these things have typos of the Chauvin trial. The final witness, Dr. Smock, testified that Mr. Floyd died a gradual death and emphasized there was no evidence he had a heart attack or any other health issues contributed to his death. Smock, a police surgeon, testified that Floyd was alert before his death and that he did not see evidence Mr. Floyd died of an overdose. The trial will continue tomorrow morning at 9:15 a.m. Let me share with a couple of little notes I took from Mr. Smock of the trial, and the portion of the trial that I was able to watch once I got a break from work, because I'm working in the courts from home, and I'm doing double duty here. When my court is silent for a second, I jump on and watch. Let's see here. Okay, the question is with George Floyd. The question for me was, would George Floyd be alive with the... Okay, to me, the question is, would Mr. Floyd still be living with all of his underlying health issues and the drugs he ingested on the day he was executed by Chauvin? Would he still be living? He seemed jovial and happy inside the dust mart, like Mike Michelson calls him. He seemed happy and exuberant. He was sitting in his car just fine. So for defense to constantly try to make it about his drug use, he's just getting slammed by all the medical examiners, because the question is, would he be alive today but for the knee on the neck? With the fentanyl, methamphetamines, COVID, cardio challenges, whatever underlying health issues, would he still be living today? Now, if you can tell me he'd have been dead at the end of the day from the drug use, and you can convince me of that, when the experts say it was less, it was less drug in his system than 94% of people arrested for DUIs. So I would venture to say that he would still be alive. So also, Dr. Smock talked about tolerance, how you grow a tolerance to drugs and alcohol. So when you've been doing drugs or alcohol for years, you build a tolerance. So you really had to take more and more and more and more and more just to feel the high, is what he talked about. And he, confirmed every chance he got that he died from asphyxia. The body was deprived of oxygen. He talked about excited delirium. He talked about excited delirium. Let's look it up, family. There were 10 points. And in order to have died from excited delirium, like defense is trying to say he died from, he's trying to make his execution his fault, the bystander's fault, the 911 call, the 911 operator's fault. Hey, let's look it up. I want to read you these points since we got a little bit more time on this show. It might go a little bit over because I want to talk with you guys about how the jury can be hung with just one juror finding him not guilty. This is just, I just can't even believe. And so that is who defense is. That is who defense is trying to find. That one race soldier. And we're going to talk about the witnesses, who they are, their background. We got a little bit of minute over here, y'all. I'm not going to keep you too long, but I do want to get through some of my show that I've researched and kind of cut and paste together for you this evening. Okay. I want to go over the signs of excited delirium that he ruled out. Hold on. I got to pull it up. Okay. I'm trying to find that list of 10. Signs. Hold on, guys. I'm so sorry. I didn't bring this up like I had intended to. 10 signs and symptoms of excited delirium. Can I just have that wonderful list? Or maybe they put that together. That's probably what it was. They put it together for the case because it's not here in a succinct fashion. Let's just see. Excited delirium, I'm just going to define it for you. A condition that manifests as a combination of delirium, psychomotor agitation, anxiety, hallucination, speech disturbances, disorientation, violent and bizarre behavior, insensitivity to pain, elevated body temperature, and superhuman strength. Dr. Smock ruled all of it out. You need 6 of 10 of what I just read you to prove that Mr. Floyd died from excited delirium as the defense is trying to claim. And Dr. Smock did an amazing job ruling each of them out. He gave an explanation of why it couldn't be this, why it couldn't be that, why it couldn't be the third. Okay. He talked about intoxication, being intoxicated versus ODing. That was critical. There's a huge difference between being intoxicated and being an ODing. When you OD, it's like you just disappear into sleep until your heartbeat just stops. That's an OD, overdose. So that's not the case with Mr. Floyd. He didn't take an excessive amount of drugs that put him into a sleep that ultimately expired him. Now, that's the way I'm paraphrasing what I heard, okay? I'm not a doctor. So to try to quote him verbatim, I can't do that. But I understood that he was describing the difference to the jurors to help them understand The difference between being intoxicated and when you OD. When you OD, it puts you to sleep indefinitely. Your heart rate just gets smaller and smaller and smaller until it just, okay. Okay, so the other points I already shared with you, how prosecutors were waxing the ass of defense. I share with you about Chauvin putting pressure on his hand. In addition to the knee on the neck and the knee in the back, he put tremendous pressure on his hands while cuffed, in the prone position, face down. The bruising on his shoulder, the bruising on his face. His body was cold when he arrived at the hospital. That was another thing he used to rule out excited delirium, because he talked about how the body overheats when you're in excited delirium. Okay. All right. So let me get on over here to my next thing, and I'm going to come over there, talk to y'all in just a second, and welcome you. Okay. I just want to keep the show moving because I got a couple things to share. Okay. I want to talk about when a tie is really a win. Hung juries and mistrials. The saying goes that when a game ends in a tie, it's like kissing your sister. Not very appetizing for most of us without incestuous impulses. What? But when you're talking about a jury trial, a tie is usually a win for defense and a loss for the government. But let's back up. All persons charged with a felony or one of a few specific misdemeanors, including DUI, second offense, and assault on a police officer in Washington, D.C., are entitled to a trial by jury, a trial before 12 members of the community. In a jury trial, the government must convince these 12 people beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed the crime or crimes he is charged with. To find a defendant guilty, the decision to convict must be unanimous. On the flip side, to find the defendant not guilty, the jury must also vote unanimously for acquittal. So what happens when the jury members can't come to a unanimous decision and are unable to deliver a verdict of either guilty or not guilty? We call this a deadlock or hung jury. And when this happens, the judge declares a mistrial and sends the jury home. Neither side wins, and we have our tie. Nothing gets resolved, and it's a bad outcome for everyone, right? Not so fast. When a prosecutor brings the full weight of government resources, money, and personnel against a defendant, they expect to get a conviction. Theoretically, the government decides to prosecute only cases in which they believe the defendant is guilty, and they think they can prove it. When they fail to do that, they've lost. And a loss for the government is almost always a win for the defense. How big a win depends on the defendant's individual circumstances. There are several ways that a defendant may benefit from a hung jury. First, the government may choose not to have a second trial and may dismiss the case instead. This is only likely to happen if the jury that deadlocked had more votes for not guilty than guilty. Obviously, this is the best possible outcome because the case is over. Short of dismissing the case, the government may make a more generous plea offer. This may look like a felony plea with minimal or no jail time, or a plea to a misdemeanor offense. In very serious cases, including gun cases, this may not be a likely outcome. But even if the government decides to rebring the case, a defendant who is not in custody gains the benefit of time and freedom. So that's the harrowing news about that. Defense is looking for that one. And we are praying for a conviction that it's guilty across the board. Okay, so moving on. 12 jurors and 2 alternates will actually hear the evidence, okay? The panel includes 6 men and 9 women. 9 of the jurors are white, 4 are black, and 2 are multiracial. Now me speaking. Of the blacks, I think 3 are black immigrant. I know 1 is in IT. Let's keep reading. They include a chemist, a nurse, a social worker, and a grandmother. So let's look at them closely. Juror number 2. Here's a closer look at the panel in the order in which jurors were selected. They are identified by juror number only. The judges ordered their names withheld until after the trial due to high-profile nature of the case. Their races are approximate. Their races, hi, Woni. If you want to see me live, I'm on YouTube for a few more minutes under the reparationist perspective. Thank you for joining the clubhouse. So their races and approximate ages were provided by the court. Juror number 2 is a white man in his 20s who works as a chemist. With a combined degree in environmental studies and chemistry, he works in a lab where he tests samples for contaminants that may be harmful to the environment or worker hygiene. He said he enjoys outdoor activities, including ultimate frisbee, backpacking, and biking. He and his fiancée visited George Floyd Square because Floyd's arrest was such a transformative event for that area. You guys, as I read this, you be the judge. How you think they may vote, the outcome of their vote. He said he worked for 7 or 8 summers at a camp through his childhood synagogue. He considers himself to be a logical thinker and is the only juror on the panel who said he has never seen bystander video of Floyd's arrest. Wow. Well, that's true. Lots of people opted not to be traumatized. Juror number 9 is a multiracial woman in her 20s who has type 1 diabetes. She grew up in northern Minnesota, has an uncle who is a police officer in that area. Uh-oh. She described herself as a go-with-the-flow, open-minded type of person and said she was super excited to get her jury notice. She said she has only watched the bystander video once, and it gave her a somewhat negative impression of Chauvin. She said that video just makes you sad. Nobody wants to see somebody die, whether it was his fault or not. It was clearly his fault, but okay. She said there could be other possible explanations for Chauvin's actions, suggesting that Floyd might have been resisting or civilian lives may have been in danger. So now she knows. Juror number 19 is a white man in his 30s. He is an auditor who said he tries to resolve conflict and make decisions based on facts, not emotions. He has a friend who was a canine officer with the Minneapolis Police Department. He said he supports Black Lives Matter as a general concept, but disagrees with some of the ways group members go about things. That's problematic for me. The grassroots is doing a hell of a job. Quite a few of the leaders have been executed, while the Federation cleared $90 million last year and is yet to trickle money down to the families to investigate. Many of these executions, they claim these leaders of the grassroots basically committed suicide. Even one young brother whose mom was in the Black Lives Matter movement, hanging from a tree after the Mike Brown execution with his pants down. They labeled that a suicide. A young girl was recently found in the river. So I'm not a fan of him saying, this is when you know that they don't know enough. Having an unfavorable opinion about that disagrees with some of the ways, against Black Lives Matter. He has an unfavorable opinion of Blue Lives Matter. That's good. That's a good sign. He wrote in his questionnaire that he heard Floyd was on hard drugs, but said he doesn't believe it should have much impact on. He said he doesn't believe it should have much impact on the case. Quote, whether you are under the influence of drugs doesn't determine whether you should be living or dead, he said. That's promising. Juror number 27 is a Black man in his 30s who immigrated to America more than 14 years ago. This is the IT person who believes in cops. He went to school in Nebraska and moved to Minnesota in 2012. He manages 8 people at his job in IT security and speaks multiple languages, including French. He and his wife have a dog, but no children. He is a big Minnesota Gophers fan and loves the Vikings. He said he had a somewhat negative view of Chauvin based on clips of bystander video he saw on TV. He said he talked with his wife about Floyd's death. We talked about how it could have been me or anyone else, he said. Juror number 27 said he hopes to learn more about events that led up to Floyd's arrest. Well, I read in something else that he believes in the police. But of course he would, working in IT. Because the race soldiers aren't in your community executing your people by government sanctions. State-sanctioned executions are not happening where you live. They're happening by the Dust Smart Cup Foods, okay? Juror number 44 is a white woman in her 50s, a single mom of 2 teenage boys. She's an executive in the nonprofit sector, working in healthcare advocacy. She said she had prior professional dealings with Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison in her job, but said it would not affect her impartiality. She said she was exposed to a lot of news about this case, adding that the media is biased and doesn't have all the facts. She saw only part of the bystander video and says she has empathy for both Floyd and Chauvin. She says she had a somewhat negative view of Chauvin and a neutral opinion of Floyd, saying he was not a model citizen but didn't deserve to die. Okay. She says she strongly agrees that the criminal justice system is biased against racial and ethnic minorities. Not all police are bad. Here we go. White-splaining, male-splaining. Not all police are bad, she said. I don't want them terrorized or disrespected, but bad police need to go. Juror number 52 is a black man in his 30s. He describes himself as a friendly, positive person. He works in banking and is a sports fan, especially basketball. He coaches youth sports and writes creatively for a hobby, including scripts and poetry. He's probably ADOX. He said he had a neutral opinion. He had neutral opinions on Chauvin and Floyd. He said he has not seen the bystander video in its entirety, but has seen clips of it 2 or 3 times. He hasn't posted about it on social media, but has talked with his family and friends, and he wrote in his questionnaire that his opinion has been, why didn't the other officers stop Chauvin? You know, the 16-page dossier to make sure people like me were in the jury. People like me and us in the reparationist movement were being profiled in that 16-page dossier. Look up the archives. I don't have time to do it in this segment. We're almost at the hour. Quote, I don't know if he was doing something wrong or not, but somebody died. Even if you have no intention of doing something and something happens, somebody could have still intervened and prevented that, he said. He has a very favorable view of Black Lives Matter, saying Black lives just want to be treated as equals and not killed or treated in an aggressive manner simply because they are Black. Juror number 55 is a white woman in her 50s who is a single parent of 2 children. Her youngest is a teenager. She works as an executive assistant at the healthcare clinic and sells Pampered Chef. She enjoys riding motorcycles, saying she picked it up because her late husband was interested in it, and she rides with him now in the spirit. I guess he's expired. He's transitioned into the... He's transitioned. He's left the body. She said she was disturbed by the bystander video, and I just couldn't watch it anymore. She said she had a somewhat unfavorable view of Chauvin because she feels he could have handled the situation differently. Still, she says she wouldn't be able to form an opinion until she has all the facts. She has a basic trust in police officers and a somewhat unfavorable view of Black Lives Matter, saying, all lives matter to me. It doesn't matter who they are or what they are. Ooh, child, the ghetto. If all lives matter, that would include Black lives who are disproportionately imprisoned in the new slavery, not so new slavery, the private prison industrial complex, who are disproportionately executed by the race soldiers. Stop it with this all lives matter BS. Juror number 79 is a Black man in his 40s. This is promising. I didn't know they had 2 ADOX men. He's a migrant. Nothing against black immigrants. But y'all know some of y'all's people. Allies, you know some of your people can be like our black white oppressors. We got them to an ADOX. We got them to an ADOX. So I'm not just picking on black immigrants. Coonville runs through both sides of blackness. Trust and believe. Back to the text. He's a black man in his 40s, a father who works in management, has lived in the Twin Cities area for about 2 decades after immigrating to America. He said he lives in a suburb and his home was burglarized once and police responded appropriately, even though the suspect was never caught. He said he trusts police, but also feels it's appropriate for jurors to evaluate an officer's actions. Quote, I would say it's another pair of eyes and a new mind just looking at the action, he said. He has a son about to take driver's education. He said he would tell his son that when police stop him, he should cooperate. What difference does that make? Hello, Philando Castile. What difference does cooperation make when you catch yourself on the wrong side of town with the wrong white inferior race soldier? Not just exclusive to whiteness. The Caucasoid, the glacier donkeys. Not just exclusive to them. What difference does it make? I shared with you guys about the sister going across town at 2 a.m. to pick up her nephew. She was in the medical field and she happened to catch herself on the wrong side of town after a protest in Philly. They broke through her glass, dragged her out and dragged her teen nephew out and captured a photo with her baby. Captured a photo with her baby as if the baby had been walking around on shards of glass at 2 a.m. in the morning unattended. The baby was in the back seat of the car when they did this. Freaked the baby out completely, of course. So that could be any of us. Because when these white inferior race soldiers, who the FBI has already told us, have infiltrated the police force all throughout the country, and I read to you in a prior archive that a 2016 FBI report of a 10-year investigation says since 2006 that the KKK, the skinheads and the neo-Nazis have infiltrated the police force, and they're able to get hired because to not hire them, they said, is a violation of their First Amendment rights. So when they're in our communities, the anchor of the country's capitalism, ADOX, whose ancestors built all the wealth all of them eat from, they're not in this guy's neighborhood. Working in management, lives in Twin Cities, lives in the burbs. That's not where they at. They practice a blood choke over by the Dust Mart where George Floyd was in Cup Foods. No money. Over a counterfeit $20 bill. So cooperation be damned if you catch yourself on the wrong side of town. Their lasers, their knees, their batons, their tasers, their guns. Don't stop and ask if I'm college degreed, if I'm a homeowner, if I'm a mother. They don't give a damn about my pedigree when they're thirsting for blood of ADOX. Because dollars bring dignity and being poor makes us targets. And this is why I fight for reparations in the trillions over multi-generations. This is my square. So get comfortable. When asked if people who don't cooperate have themselves to blame, he said, cooperation is good. You help everybody. George Floyd was cooperating. Moving on. Juror number 85 is a multiracial woman in her 40s who's married, has a small child. She grew up in a river town and attended college in western Wisconsin. She is a consultant who helps companies with reorganizations and other transitions. She says she has a neutral view of Floyd, writing in her questionnaire that she knew he died as a result of this encounter, but did not know what his actions were before it happened. I got problems with this. I got problems with this. Nothing warranted executing a man in cold blood for all the world to see when he's already been subdued, handcuffed in the prone position on the pavement. When pressed if she thought Chauvin was responsible, she said, "No, I never heard what a cause of death was. You only saw it on video." She says she has a pretty strong faith in the police, but they are human and can make mistakes. This is the same disdain I have about them saying that they need more training. They never seem to need training when the race soldiers go around and mass shoot up everybody and thing of this nature. They seem to be able to capture them alive. But this was just a mistake. This was first-degree murder. She says she would generally agree that if someone does not cooperate, he or she might have themselves to blame. You respect police and you do what they ask. See, this is a lot of white folks. This is a lot of white folks. This is the problem. White people, get your people together. This is a problem. It doesn't say whether or not she saw the video, but I'm assuming she did. It's a problem. Juror number 89 is a white woman in her 50s who lives in the suburbs. She's a registered nurse currently working with patients on ventilators, including those with COVID-19, and has prior experience in cardiac care. She was questioned extensively about her experience as a nurse, whether she has ever resuscitated anyone, and how she would view medical evidence in the case. The woman said she would draw upon her knowledge to evaluate medical testimony, but said she refrained from using her knowledge in the jury room. How do you do that? How do you do that? She's going to draw upon her knowledge to evaluate the medical testimony, but says she refrained from using her knowledge in the jury room. Maybe she means allowed to the other jurors as not to sway their decisions. I don't know. She said she somewhat disagrees that it's not right to second-guess decisions officers make. Let's just hope they're learning now. I personally am appealing to the Christ in them from the Christ within me, because in the flesh, we can't do it. I've gotten many a thing done going within. I'm praying to Judge Cahill to give the maximum sentence on all three accounts, and I am praying to the Christ within those juries, within those jurors, to deliver a guilty verdict on all three charges, and all the time be strung together for him to do time. And I'm praying for general population. If I get in the ballpark of that, it will be well with my soul. Juror number 91, a Black woman in her 60s. She's a grandma of two who studied child psychology and worked in marketing before she retired. She felt strongly that being on a jury was her civic duty. The woman who volunteers with underserved youth said she watched the bystander video of Floyd's arrest for about 4 or 5 minutes, then shut it off because it just wasn't something that I needed to see. She grew up about 10 or 15 blocks from the site of Floyd's arrest, but says she moved decades ago and has no reason to revisit the area. She had a very favorable view of Black Lives Matter, writing in her questionnaire, "I am Black and my life matters," though she says she is not familiar with the organization. She has a relative who was a police officer with Minneapolis. So, of the 4 Black jurors, 2 Black men are from they migrated to this country, doing quite well for themselves. The race soldiers aren't in their communities. One ADOX man that appears to be doing well for himself, and an ADOX woman that appears to be doing well for herself. Juror number 92 is a white woman in her 40s who works in the commercial insurance business. She says she has experience with someone who struggled with alcohol and might view someone who uses drugs cautiously out of fear they could act violently or aggressively when under the influence. Still, she says she doesn't agree that someone who uses drugs or doesn't cooperate with police should be treated poorly. If someone uses drugs, I don't think there should be ramifications of violence for that, she said. They don't treat white opioid addicted people in the manner they treat black ADOX who are addicted to drugs. White folks get rehab, black folks get George Floyd, or they have to go to prison. For drugs and guns that the FBI and the CIA were complicit in bringing into our communities. And then starve us out of jobs. Allow our affirmative action to benefit white women first, immigrants second, and LGBTQIA third. Can't get work. That's by design of institutional systemic racism. Juror number 96 is a white woman in her 50s who had a job in customer service but is between jobs. She has done volunteer work with the homeless and wants to work on affordable housing issues. She said she has only seen clips of the video of Floyd's arrest and said she needs to learn more about what happened beforehand. She says she's never personally seen police officers respond to black people or minorities with more force than white people. She also said a person should have nothing to fear from police if they cooperate and comply with commands. Though she stopped short of saying that means a person deserves to be harmed. Quote, if they're not listening to what the commands are, obviously something else needs to happen to resolve the situation, she said of officers' actions. I don't know how far the steps need to go. Wow. Juror number 118 is a white woman in her 20s who was married in October, recently got a golden doodle puppy. She's been a social worker for 5 years and currently coordinates in-home services for people of all ages and mental health diagnoses to help them live independently. She said she has had conversations with others about police reform and says she thinks there are things that should be changed, but she also described police and their jobs as important and said she is always looking at every side of things. I love those little golden doodle puppies. They're so cute. If my memory serves me, they look like little pieces of fried chicken. Just adorable. Juror number 131, white man in his 20s, is an accountant who is married and has a Bernese mountain dog puppy. He's a sports fan who enjoys March Madness and plays sports himself, including tennis. He said he approaches things with an analytical mind. He said he initially formed a somewhat negative opinion of Chauvin, saying the duration of his restraint on Floyd was longer than necessary. He said Floyd's death sparked discussions about racism at work, and he decided to read a book about the subject. He said he has a healthy respect for police and views Black Lives Matter somewhat favorably, but noted he believes some frustrations contributed to violent unrest in Minneapolis. He also said he understands that professional athletes who kneel during the national anthem are trying to start a dialogue on race, but, quote, I would prefer if someone would express their beliefs in a different manner. Let me come over and see what y'all have got to say about it. That concludes what I wanted to share. Welcome to the live, one and all. Thank you for joining the live. So let's go see the comments and welcome you guys. Brian Johnson, welcome to the live, my love. The state is knocking this case out the park, especially with today's witnesses. Hope they keep this up. It was brilliant. It was fire. M. Terry 007, welcome to the live, my love. Kimberly Witcher, girl, that was brilliant. That is going to be a conviction. Yes, Miss Witcher. Yes. That's the prayer. We're going to get a conviction. But until these laws change, we'll never get justice. Brian says, to put it coarsely, defense was hanging on to the teats of a lost cause. I don't know if that's a typo. Erie Blackfire B1 family, welcome ADOS, ADOX, FBA, B1. Welcome one and all to the line. Thank you. Kimberly says they're about to bring up Chauvin's past complaints. Oh, they're going to go in on that. But the closing by the prosecution, they're about to shut the game all the way down. And their cross of defense's shenanigans. The cross is going to be brilliant because they've been doing a brilliant job on cross. Every time Nelson comes, they dig their knees figuratively into the neck of Nelson in his case. Kimberly says he was determined to kill him. Yes, he was. First-degree murder. It was not drugs. Yes, ma'am, it was not drugs. Brian says, I like how the last witness, Smock, pointed out Floyd moving his hands against the car to try and turn himself and get breath and to breathe better. Yes, he did. Thank you for that reminder, Brian. He did talk about how he was using his body parts to try to open up his chest to get more breath to the lungs. That was brilliant. Fire. Kimberly says, did you see his face turn red for a minute? He looked like he was about to cry for a minute. They might go for second-degree murder. 40 years get second. 40 years. I'll take it. Kimberly said, I don't know whose face. You talk about turning red. It felt to me like Dr. Smock was having a moment. It felt to me, but I don't know who you're referring to. Kimberly, if you're still here, tell me whose face turned red for a minute. He looked like he was about to cry. I know it wasn't Chauvin. Chauvin's been deadpan, scribbling in his pad. He's probably coloring. What's up, ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery? I see you, fam. Thank you for joining the live. I can't stand him either. Robert Kennedy, hi. Welcome to the live. Hi, Morgan. She's back on Clubhouse. I'm going to come over there in a second, Morgan. I'm just finishing up the comments before I pray him out over here. Nelson does not have a leg to stand on right now. Not a one. He's drowning. Thank you, Robert Kennedy. You look like an ally. I love allies. Melanated integrity. We love the hashtag value you add to hashtag us. All. Thank you so much, Melanated Integrity. I appreciate your kind words. Stanley Johnson. Boo, there it is. Woo, there it is. That's right, Stanley. Welcome to the live, my love. Babe Racks. It's always so good to see you, family. Thank you for joining the live. Robert Kennedy says, it's so sad. You're very right, sir. Nelson is too damn much. Nelson is doing a job. I mean, like Robert Townsend said in Hollywood Shuffle. I think his grandmama said there's work at the post office. You couldn't pay me the blood money. You couldn't pay me to defend Chauvin. I guess somebody's got to do it. Nelson tried it. The state's witnesses fried it. Brian Johnson. Oh my God. I got to show that. Nelson tried it. The state's witnesses fried it. You are on fire. Thank you for that. They're trying to kill us all. Yes, Robert Kennedy. They are trying to kill us all. Kimberly says, a couple of the attorneys were amazed at the way the toxicologist and doctor broke down every frame in that video. Even they were amazed, even to the point where the flicker of life went out of his body. Hey, I didn't get to see everything, but what I saw was brilliance. Robert Kennedy, I love your show, Angela. We're behind you 100%. Thank you, Robert Kennedy. I appreciate your kind words. That's beautiful. I'm going to flash that because I like that too. I like that too. Thank you so much, everyone, for supporting the show. Brian says, unless defense can bring in an expert that can express a convincing opinion on Floyd's drug use, being able to, of itself, contribute to his death, the case is a slam dunk for the state. Let's stay in a prayer posture, family. We know how these things have turned out in the past. Remember Rodney King. Remember all of them who have not gotten justice. I'm just saying. It looks like a slam dunk for the state, but stay prayed up. I want the God in you to talk to every one of them jurors I just named. I'm going to put their jury numbers down and pray. And the judge. Okay? So that's what we got to do, family. We got to stay prayed up because brace yourself for the worst and be pleasantly surprised for a guilty verdict in real time in general pop. That's my position. Kimberly says, I can't see how with those witnesses, but never mind. Racism is deep in America with 3 Ks. That's right, sis. It is. You must know it. We live it. Brian says, yes, the excited delirium theory was dismantled very effectively by the last witness. Didn't add up in any of the 10 points. It was fire. Hi, Marjorie. I'll be right over, fam. I'm just closing out my live over here at the Reparations Perspective on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Kimberly says, I'm praying hard, but good night. Good night, my love. Adrian, the Reparations Perspective, you better know it. ADOS Truth, buffering. Oh, my God. Let me know if it's buffering, guys. I don't know how to fix that. We have no allies. No, we don't. I think white supremacists will sacrifice Chauvin. It's not about sacrificing Chauvin. They can't do nothing with Chauvin. If they could, they would save his ass. But look at the eyewitness testimony. Look at the tapes. Look at the expert witnesses, the medical examiners. It is a resounding, you murdered him. You murdered him. They have all but said you murdered him in the first degree. We have no allies. Welcome to the live, my love. Brian says, damned if you do, damned if you or don't, with race soldier police. Oh, yeah. I think white supremacy, okay, we have no allies at Brian Johnson. The case is a slam dunk, but the failure is normally the jury. All they need is one, y'all. And that's, he's going for the one. Jay Bird, I see you, fam. And with that said, family, that's my time. I hope you come back and join me on another episode of As the World of ADOX Turns. Tomorrow at noon Pacific Standard Time under the Reparationist Perspective, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Yes. Oh, I was reading Brian's comments. But with that said, I need to pray us out, so I go play in the clubhouse with a couple of guests I see over there. You're free to join me and come over there and join the stage and tell how you see it. Right now, they only have it for iPhone and iPad. They've been threatening to give it to Droid, but not yet. I want to thank you so much for rolling with your sister. You are the wind beneath my wings, the wind beneath my voice, why I stay on my square, why I show up twice a day, 12 noon Pacific Standard Time and 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Monday through Friday. I may try to take the weekend off. I've got another show I'm supposed to do on Sunday. But family, this is exhausting. You hear me? I love doing it because I'm here for the people. I'm here for ADOX. I love us black and strong. And with that said, let me pray us out the prayer of protection that the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever ADOX and his allies are, God truly is, because family, you are the face of God. You are the voice of God. You are the body temple of the Spirit of the living God. Until tomorrow, 12 noon Pacific Standard Time, you make it a beautiful, God-inspired rest of your evening. Know this, I love you, black family. I love you strong. Peace. Bye, family. Mwah, mwah, mwah.